Brief and get us off to a timely schedule. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lou Wagman. I'm a trustee of Einstein's Alley. A few words about Einstein's Alley. We're a private, nonprofit economic development organization that's located in New Jersey. Our mission is to foster economic growth and innovation through advocacy and delivery of services to attract new companies to the area, to retain the companies that are here already, and most importantly, to encourage the growth of jobs and innovation in the region. We've worked to put this together with the Partnership for a New American Economy. That partnership is a national bipartisan coalition of over 400 mayors and business leaders, and it's spearheaded by Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So thank you to them for helping us with putting together the conference today. I'd also like to thank the firm of Genova Burns, Giatomasi, and Webster for sponsoring today's event. And thanks to the Immigration and Employment Task Force who worked so hard to bring this event together. Members who have contributed to the conference are Nick Montalto, Pascal Saradarian, Peter Crowley, Anastasia Mann, Jim Baroud, Michael Klein, Aseneth Donde, and Rick Pinto. And some of those are with us this morning. Thank you again. And a special thanks to the Institute for Advanced Study. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Dr. Peter Goddard, the director of the Institute for Advanced Study. Dr. Goddard, a mathematical physicist, has been the director of the Institute for Advanced Study since January of 2004. He's distinguished for his contributions in the areas of string theory and quantum field theory, as well as strong administrative leadership in academic institutions in the United Kingdom. Formerly Master of St. John's College, the University of Cambridge, England, Dr. Goddard played a key role in the establishment of the university's Sir Isaac Newton Institute for Mathematical Sciences and served as its first deputy director. He also led the planning and fundraising for the University of Cambridge Center for Mathematical Sciences, one of the world's largest centers for research and teaching in the mathematical sciences. Dr. Goddard's the author of over 100 published papers. Dr. Goddard?
It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you here today for your conference on smart immigration. I don't think you could have chosen a more appropriate location for your meeting. And this actually, not just because this really was Einstein's Alley. If you look outside in front of Ford Hall, our main building, the alley of trees up towards Oldham Farm is the alley he walked down every day. No institution has benefited more from or embodied more the idea of smart immigration than the Institute for Advanced Study. When our founders, Louis Bamberger and his sister Caroline Bamberger Ford, themselves the children of immigrants, established the Institute in 1930, they specified that it is fundamental to our purpose and our expressed desire that in the appointments to the staff and faculty, as well as in the admission of workers and students, no account be taken, directly or indirectly, of race, religion, or sex. We feel strongly that the spirit characteristic of America at its noblest, above all, the pursuit of higher learning, cannot admit of any conditions as to personnel other than those designed to promote the objectives for which this institution is established, and particularly with no regard whatsoever to accidents of race, creed, or sex. And this was a much more forward-looking statement in 1930 than it sounds to us today. And there cannot be a clearer example of smart immigration than recruiting Albert Einstein as your first professor. When the Institute opened its doors in 1933, 3 out of the initial 5 members of faculty, Einstein, John von Neumann, and Hermann Weyl, were immigrants, refugees from the rise of Nazism in Europe. And it actually remains the case that 60% of our current permanent faculty of 28 professors come originally from abroad, from Argentina, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, England, Germany, Greece, Israel, India, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Russia, South Africa, as well as the United States. Being cosmopolitan is not the Institute's primary objective. It's just the inevitable and natural consequence of assembling the best academic talent in an unconstrained fashion. And the same international diversity is reflected each year in the 200 or so visiting fellows who come from universities around the world to spend 6 months or more at the Institute. Again, 60% of them come from abroad, typically from 35 or more countries each year. Of course, we work hard to ensure that coming here is as free from obstacles as it can be, but this has involved much more staff time in recent years. However, as you may appreciate, academics are not always the easiest of individuals to guide through the challenges of immigration. There are various versions of what happened when the great mathematical logician Kurt Gödel was interviewed by the Immigration and Naturalization Service in Trenton in 1948. He was accompanied as supporters by his great friend Albert Einstein and by Oscar Morgenstern, one of the founders of game theory. One version is that when he was asked to confirm that it was not his intention to overthrow the government of the United States by force, he replied that it wasn't necessary to use force. But the more accurate version, this really happened, was when he was asked whether he'd read and understood the Constitution of the United States, he said he was having problems because he detected a number of internal contradictions, which he felt might leave the government vulnerable to takeover by extremists. At this point, both Einstein and Morgenstern kicked him and persuaded him to shut up, and his application was approved. But it's very good to have you here, and I give you my good wishes for your important conference.
My name is Ryan Lilienthal. I am an immigration attorney, a practitioner here in Princeton, and I also want to thank the Institute for Advanced Study for providing us with this extraordinary opportunity. And in many ways, just being in this space makes the case of the policy issues that we're going to be talking about today. And so I just want to very quickly outline the program. And we're going to begin with a keynote talk, introduction by Robert Feldstein, and I'll talk about him in a second, followed by a panel moderated by Peter Kahn, who I want to thank for helping us and making our connection with the institution and the panel. And we're going to wrap up. Robert Feldstein is going to lay out the legislative landscape and what's on the horizon. You know, June's been an extraordinary month for immigration. We saw President Obama's announcement creating an administrative vehicle to provide some relief for undocumented kids. We had the Supreme Court decision come down yesterday in Arizona. But we want to focus and highlight attention, spotlight attention on the issue of high-skilled workers. High-skilled workers, the students, the Steve Jobs concept of stapling the green cards to the master's degrees, focus on opportunities for entrepreneurs and how can we make immigration policy work so that we can help America become more competitive and increase job creation and open opportunities to facilitate investment by foreign nationals in this country. So with that, I'd like to introduce Robert Feldstein, who's been a terrific partner from the Partnership for a New American Economy. Robert is a senior advisor to Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who has spearheaded the Partnership for a New American Economy and has led the way across the country to bring people together to think about how we can develop policies to expand opportunities for American competitiveness and job creation through immigration policy.
You know, the argument is that we don't need immigrants of any sort, you know, whether we're talking about legal or undocumented immigrants, when current Americans cannot find jobs. And so based on that reasoning, it's very easy for people just to say, we shouldn't do anything. It's easy for politicians in Washington to punt and not do anything. And it's one of the issues, one of the reasons why this issue has stagnated. It's a little unusual because typically in a policy situation where everybody is dissatisfied with the status quo, the politicians figure out how to move forward, break the logjam, and take action. You know, it's kind of a rule that when people are unhappy, politicians like to do things.
Thanks everybody for being here. I'm delighted to be here today. The information that I have to share is just in the last month slowly being addressed, but foreseeable, the time, we've not really been neglecting these issues, and it shows. And it shows all around New Jersey. So just to give you some context of where New Jersey sits nationally, New Jersey is an immigrant state. We say we're in the armpit of New York when we're feeling bad about ourselves, but it's true that really, New Jersey is right up there in terms of states with a high proportion of immigrants and even a high number of immigrants when you cut it certain ways. However, you look at what's happening in terms of the percentage change in the foreign-born, New Jersey is not so much really at the forefront of the new waves of immigrants are coming primarily to the southeast, many of you may know, and also to the southwest. So New Jersey is only 40th in terms of its growth in immigrant populations. Now, we really are a border state. Sometimes we say that we're a border with India, much as Arizona and Texas or California are a border with Mexico. And you see that in terms of who's here. But almost half of the people who are foreign-born who live in New Jersey are naturalized citizens. But there's a lag, and so that's one of the things that we work on in terms of some of the work that we're doing at Rutgers. Just to give you a sense of where immigrants are concentrated around the state, you can see here, this is a map put together by my colleagues at the Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis at Rutgers. And so you get a sense that the population is really generally concentrated toward the north, and some of that is spillover, obviously, and historically from New York. But moving down in southern parts of the state, we're starting to see more and more growth, and I'll break that out for you a little bit further on. Now, if you want to understand how New Jersey shapes up or compares to what's happening in the rest of the country, you can see that it's quite comparable, right? Do you notice differences? Europeans, there are more Europeans in New Jersey than in the rest of the country. And actually, with respect to the Latin American population, you can see that there is some difference. There are fewer Latin American immigrants in New Jersey than elsewhere. But an important nuance there is that there are many fewer Mexicans, people of Mexican origin in New Jersey than generally in the immigrant population in this country. So there is a significant Latin American population, but it is diverse. And just when we look at sort of the general population of immigrants in New Jersey, the three things that stand out really are the size, it's a significant number of people who are here who were born overseas, the diversity, so there really is no one dominant nation that sends people to New Jersey, and also the education level. So New Jersey immigrants tend to be have higher levels of education than those elsewhere, and there'll be more on that further along. We've really undergone a sea change in the country generally and in New Jersey specifically, and this will give you a sense. So up until through really the 70s, and it was just in the 80s. So this is census data, which means that the numbers for 1990 reflect what was going on in the 80s. And it's really in the 80s that you start to see a transition from Western Europe to Asia and Latin America. And you can see that by the 2010 census, that trend has really taken hold. And there's not a European country left in the top 5 countries. Now here's a map, a pair of maps that show what has happened to the Asian population. And this is, so Asian Indians, now these are both people who were born in India and people who were born in the US but are of Indian descent or parentage. So you can see a real intensification of the pockets where Indian families are located in the state, right in that center kind of Middlesex, and moving out somewhat over the course of the decade. So some of you will be able to locate your homes and businesses around here and recognize what's going on, but also spreading north and west, which are areas of the state that have less experience with immigration. And that's part of what we're seeing, even in the tensions that have developed around the country in the last 10 years or so. And the part of the state where there's a lot of agriculture, those populations have grown over the last decade, but also a real intensification up around the northeastern part of the state. Notice this is really a change up in the northwestern quadrant of the state as well. Really is on high-end, high-skilled immigrants. And New Jersey, this is pretty startling, I think. Only 3 states have more H-1B visas than New Jersey does. Now, you can see that California obviously is the distant leader, but New Jersey coming in fourth with a population. Think about the population of New Jersey, which is about under 9 million compared to the general populations of those other states. It's pretty startling that we would even be anywhere near the top of this chart. Working employers in New Jersey, and you'll see that you'll recognize a bunch of the names, or a few of the names anyway. Some kind of, it's a little bit actually like the map of nationalities, because you see sort of some of the old standards. You know, Barclays Capital Services has probably been around for 150 years. The National Science Foundation show that immigrants make up half of New Jersey residents with master's degrees, and over 40% of those with PhDs in the sciences. So, you know, not surprising that all the biotech companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals around us really depend on having skilled people born overseas. One of the projects that we've worked on in addition to the mapping at Rutgers is looking at the challenges of integrating immigrants and helping them become citizens, because that really, for immigrants to be a thriving part of our polity, they have to be able to vote. And they have to be able to, you know, feel confident to join a union if that's what they want to do, or join the parent-teacher organization in their kids' school, to really come out and be a part of their communities. And so what we've been looking at is the rate of the share, of the population, of the foreign-born population that is naturalizing in New Jersey. New Jersey's sense of how incredibly difficult it is in the present day to legalize yourself if you're not legal, and even once you have a green card, it's not so simple. It's an arduous process, and a costly process, and a scary process. So you know, for everybody's sake, as we've heard, it really makes sense to simplify it. At Eagleton, at the Program of Immigration and Democracy, we're really engaged in doing research to better understand sort of the facts of the situation, as you've heard, who's out there, what the challenges are. And also in this service component most recently. And also to say that the data that we did, that we used to create some of those maps, comes from partly from community-based organizations, which are really where the rubber meets the road, as I said, for these immigrant communities. And we're then turning that data back over to the state in the form of New Jersey 211, which is you may have heard of this, it's a kind of referral line, so you can call and get, if you need, you know, a place to find ESL services in your neighborhood. You call them up and they will make a referral if you need, you know, Polish information about child care or domestic violence. They'll make a referral. So we're participating with them and helping them get better information about who is out there in immigrant New Jersey, because we really are a little bit too siloed. Has worked best for the whole society. We held our first naturalization ceremony at Rutgers this year. So the point is, we're really trying to sort of realize that this is where we are and that there's a lot to be gained for everybody, and Rutgers wants to play a part of that, and you obviously all do too, which is why you're here to learn more. So thank you very much.
I'm here at home, so I'd like to introduce our panel, have our panelists come up. Our panel, I've had the pleasure of working as co-chair with Peter of Princeton Future, and Sheldon Sturgis is here, our managing director. Peter has a very long history from the very beginning here in Princeton. He grew up in Princeton and graduated from Harvard University. For 45 years, he worked for the Wall Street Journal as a reporter for correspondents in Vietnam and Asia for 12 years, editor, publisher, and chairman and CEO of the Wall Street Journal's parent company, Dow Jones. Peter won the Pulitzer Prize for coverage of the birth of Bangladesh in 1972. He's the trustee of both the Institute for Advanced Study, and as I indicated, he's a co-chair of Princeton Future. And I'd like to welcome him here and have him introduce our panelists. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Ryan. The one thing I would add to that introduction is I'm actually the son of immigrants, in this case from Austria, and I'm also the father of 2 immigrants, which is to say 2 Korean children adopted from Korea, or Korean American now, of course. So it gives me a strong personal interest in immigration, and I'm really pleased to be part of this today. I also just wanted to join in thanking Peter Goddard, who is retiring as the director of the Institute within the next few days, although happily not from the physics faculty. So his appearing here this morning was, if not his final act as director, certainly one of the near final ones. We have 50 minutes for this panel, so we'll try to devote roughly 30 of it to some questions I can pose to the panel, or indeed they can pose to each other, and then we'll try to allow about 20 minutes for questions from the audience. I'll just keep the introductions very brief. Seifi Ghasemi is chairman and CEO of Rockwood Holdings, a publicly owned chemical company. He's a mechanical engineer, and he is himself a native of Iran. Darrell Hamill is co-founder of Princeton Power Systems and a computer scientist. Stuart Smith is Dean of Research at Princeton University and a native of Canada and a physicist. And you've already heard from Darrell West, who will be joining the panel. Okay, first question, and this one I would address to each of you. You know, you each may come to this issue of immigration from different vantage points, but could you each very briefly explain why people in your industry or institution or profession, and also why you personally attach so much importance to the issue, why you're here? Start from the left, perhaps?
Left is,
oh, that's,
okay.
Well, the left from the audience, right?
Well, Peter Goddard said a very large amount of what would be high priority for me representing the university community. So I'm frantically revising some of the remarks so I didn't bore you by repeating his. But I think it's just clear that the United States has been probably profited more than any other country throughout the 20th century from immigration. Peter's example is just telling, and there are hundreds or thousands of them. And one just example that's very local is that in one little high school in Budapest, 5 of the most famous physicists during the World War II period came out And their names, I think you would know. One is von Neumann, who came here. Eugene Wigner, a Nobel Prize winner, came to Princeton University. Louis Szilard was the person who convinced Einstein to write the letter to Roosevelt on the atom bomb. Edward Teller, everybody knows. And we also had von Karman, a real huge pioneer in aviation and fluid dynamics. All came from this one high school in Budapest. And so the country would be different if it weren't for that, even that single high school. Now, going today, at Princeton, 2/3 of our postdocs are on temporary visas. It turns out half of our assistant professors are on temporary visas. And if you ask the international component of those, this does not include the assistant professors who were born in other countries and have since immigrated and achieved permanent residence. So I don't know that number, but this is just typical of most research universities. And but what we're seeing is major competition from other countries that just didn't exist before. A good example of that was pointed out several times by Subra Suresh, director of the National Science Foundation and former dean of engineering at MIT, a classic example himself, who was educated in one of the elite Indian institutes for technology and came to MIT for graduate study, stayed on. He's now goes back and works with them, and he says that because other countries are now developing and they have other options than the US, they're not coming to the US, whereas in his day, there was no other option. Everybody came to the US, and we can see in many industries that the contribution of people from India is just tremendous. And so you ask why? Well, I think from Princeton, our worst problem is everything derives from outstanding faculty. And just like Peter Goddard and the Institute, this is a worldwide market. We want to get the best in the world. And so the backlog and uncertainty in obtaining legal and permanent residence just puts stress on people, many of whom are at a very difficult time in their lives. And it's a huge deterrent for them. And so this is something that we really need to work on. And this can happen even at the most senior level. I've seen it when there be a dean or deans are over the hill, but sorry, not that, but a distinguished senior professor cannot come for a long time and in many cases has decided not to bother. And so we have very time-consuming and expensive process, has been pointed out. I was chairing the Department of Physics, and I was running a big experiment at Stanford, and I spent probably a day a week writing letters of support for people even getting H-1B visas. And you had to sort of lie. You had to say, this is the best person. The country will suffer greatly if this person isn't allowed to come in. And why are we shooting ourselves in the foot like that? Another one that's in my field is international conferences. Big international conferences with the most topical results often can't choose their speakers until rather close to the deadline, to the actual conference, because you want to get the most exciting science and the people who made the biggest contributions. Sometimes they are young, sometimes they're not well recognized, and they come from sensitive countries. International collaborations now have Iranian physicists, they have people from China and other sensitive countries. The US is now on the blacklist for many of these things. In physics, there's an international union of pure and applied physics. Said you have to make a huge case to show why having a conference of this nature in the United States wouldn't be really fail or be damaged by the inability of the best speakers to get visas in a timely fashion. So this has been pointed out for now 6 or 7 years by the National Academy, who had 2 reports. The first one was called The Gathering Storm. The second one 2 years ago was The Gathering Storm Revisited, Approaching Category 5. And then just this last week, there was a report on research universities, the future of America. And in all of these cases, there are 2 major recommendations. One is we are very weak in recruiting the number of talented and retaining the number of talented people in what they call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, and especially in recruiting underrepresented minorities and women. This is a serious problem. And So that was one of their recommendations, and this has been all of these panels, is you've got to do something about this. The second one is that you've got to make it possible for international people to come and join us. We cannot do without them as we've done. Just one comment. Just locally, we have the National Laboratory for Fusion Research out there at Forrestal. It was the inventor of the whole field. It had the leading machines until the late 90s. And now we find that we have still the world's expertise in this field. Every other country wants our people to come and train them and work with them, but we have no big machines being built. China, Japan, Korea, and Europe all have budgets 2 or 3 times ours. And so this expertise, once transferred, we will not be needed, and this is going to be another field. There are similar examples in other fields, particle physics, lots of others where not only the funding but the lack of the competition from other countries is changing the playing field. Now, as a dual citizen, I'd just like to say a couple of contrasts. When I was when I lived up in Canada many years ago, Canada was a stepping stone to the U.S. There was a dreadful brain drain problem because it was easier to get into the U.S. from Canada than from many other countries. People would come there, and as soon as they could leave, they did. That's now changed completely in that you find now, if anything, there's a drift towards Canada from the United States, and certainly it and other countries like Australia in particular, which is benefiting from the Asian development, are very fierce competitors. Just as a joke, I thought I would see if I could immigrate to Canada. So I looked last night on the Canadian immigration website. It's electronic. And you just click and skill-based priorities. And they also have an entrepreneur class, a venture capital class, and those with higher education in fields of national need. I figured that's what I might have a chance in. There's a maximum score of 100 based on the level of your education, your age, your language fluency in French and English, and whether you have a job offer in a field of national need. And the companies are encouraged to make these job offers before the immigration process starts. So, okay, I got 89 out of 100. Passing grade is 67. Lost 10 points because I'm old, and 1 because I can only read and speak French with moderate success, and I'm not completely fluent. Now, if you looked at the same thing for entrepreneurs in other cases, it's very similar, and they're just eating our lunch. One example that shocked me, I'm from the West Coast, Victoria and Vancouver, is that Microsoft, of course, is based in Seattle, but they've opened a big place in Vancouver now because they can get people there because of immigration. And they also don't have other worries like export controls, ITAR, and all of these other things. And so we see that there are a lot of, it used to be that Canada had these branch plants where they were just providing the lower level stuff. But now we see a switch there where people are, now this is not bad, this is a part of globalization, but when you put it right next to Seattle for Microsoft, it's sort of suggesting maybe there's an artificial border. So anyway, that's, I think the things that were mentioned about what's happening, the Staple Act, for allowing giving green cards to PhDs. There's a Mission China program where Chinese scientists will be given visas regularly and easily, and the other ways of encouraging entrepreneurs. A system doesn't sound so different than what's already in place, Canada, Australia, and many other countries. So I hope that we can go that way to retain our necessary innovation. The only way we're going to compete in standard of living is by innovation. The U.S. does that better than anybody, but the other people are trying to catch up. Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. Pose the same question to Safi and Daryl. Basically, what brings you here? And try to keep it as brief as possible so we get to more questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, to be able to participate in this very important debate. The overall benefits of immigration is pretty obvious. Other people have articulated that. And quite honestly, where would the United States be without immigration? At the end of the day, everybody is an immigrant here. And for me, it is kind of interesting to watch that there is even a debate about immigration in this country where everybody, at the end of the day, came here as an immigrant. So sometimes we seem to forget where our forefathers came from and start having this issue about whether it's good or bad to have immigration. But I would like to just focus on high-skill immigration specifically for our company. We are a public company, we are a commercial enterprise, and our goal is to be the best. To be the best, what do you need? You need good people. Building plants and facilities is easy, but to beat the competition, which is what we are in the business of, it's not good enough to say that we are, out of 100, we are good at 95%. But if the competition is at 98, we lose. So the important thing is to be the best, better than the competition. The only way you can do that is by having very highly talented people that can develop, innovate products that consumers need, and as a result, you can win on a global basis, because we have to compete with global companies. So for us, it is essential to have access to and be able to attract the very best to our company. And if we want to have that company be a strong American company, we need to be able to bring those people here, attract them, and not only be able to bring them here, but also have an atmosphere so that they want to stay here. These people that we are talking about are highly intelligent, highly ambitious, and very capable people who have many, many options. They are not people who are desperate that they have to come here to get a job. They're people who have options. And therefore, we need to, when we make it very difficult to bring them here, and we as a company, when we identify a very highly talented Brazilian or highly talented Taiwanese whom we want to bring to the US, when we go through all of these obstacles, these people get disheartened and say, well, why do I need to bother? And then when they come here, if they don't feel welcome, that becomes another issue. So I think the whole challenge of being able to attract the very best is really the key thing, and we need to facilitate that, and we are having difficulties doing that. Later on, I can talk a little bit about the difficulties. I'm sure it would give us an opportunity. Thanks.
Darren?
Sure. So I guess what brings me here, when I started my company about 10 years ago out of the university here at Princeton, I approached the immigration issue, like pretty much everything else, very naively. I knew almost nothing about it. But like Seifi was saying, that the key with our company, aside from our technology, was trying to find really good people to bring on board. And we sort of quickly started finding that we ran into some issues just getting the people that we found that we thought were the best, the ability to actually work here. And it was something we had no experience with, but very quickly had to start learning a bit about. Unlike Seifi's company and a small company, nothing we did was easy. Everything was hard. But this just provided kind of one more obstacle. We would go out and try to find people. We'd interview everybody we could and eventually pick the best person. And then to find out later that there's this extra obstacle, the legal issues with bringing this person on board because they weren't a U.S. citizen, was surprising and just added kind of an extra set of tasks to my day. So sort of approaching it that way, we eventually, we sorted through a lot of those issues. We have a lot of immigrants in our company. But even now, it seems like the way the rules have all been set up, it's almost like assuming that companies are going to try to do the wrong thing and penalize them and force us to go through a whole lot of additional hurdles to bring on the people that we think are the best people. And we always approached it as, why we haven't done anything wrong yet, so why is it assumed that we're looking for the lowest cost labor so we can exploit them instead of hiring somebody else that we know could do the job better. I can assure you that was never the case for us, so it just seemed like a lot of extra work. So it started to become sort of a personal vendetta for me to try to understand what was happening with the system and any way that we could help improve it. I have a lot of very interesting stories that maybe I can share later about some of the things we've been through.
Okay, we'll come to some of the anecdotes in a couple of minutes. A couple of more general questions to anyone on the panel, actually. I mean, in the last fiscal year, I believe the U.S. gave green cards to more than 1 million people. To some, that would actually seem reasonably generous. So is the issue that the total is too low, or is the issue one of misallocation and wrong priorities, or both? Sort of to any of you.
Well, I think that we can debate a lot about the mechanics of which laws and what obstacles there are toward immigration, but especially for higher skilled people. But I like to kind of focus on maybe a more general, fundamental issue. I'll take my own personal example. I came to the United States for the first time in 1966 from a strange part of the world. It took me almost no time to be welcomed, integrated into the community, because the fundamental attitude that I saw was everybody in the United States is an immigrant. Everybody came here. The only difference is that some people's boat got here a little bit sooner than the other people. There was no feeling of there are real Americans and non-Americans. That made a significant impression to a young person like me, who's very impressionable, very ambitious, you want to do things. It made you welcome. And then, once I graduated, there was no hurdle. There was almost nothing to stop me from getting a job. I basically probably had to fill in maybe an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I said, I want to work here, and I got a work permit, and I was able to work here. So I think the issue that we have right now, there are two. One is that, unfortunately, the whole political debate, people for taking political advantage, have changed this whole issue of immigration to, well, we have Americans, and, well, some people maybe are not Americans. People on the national level going around saying, I have been to real America, now I have come to New York, which is not so much real America. That, I think, is turning off the very highly educated, ambitious people who want to come here. They don't like that atmosphere. But then the second thing is that in the 1950s, in the 1960s, after the Second World War, the United States was the only place that something was happening. The rest of the world was either bombed out in Europe, and the rest of the world, nothing was happening. But today, the young, energetic, ambitious Brazilian or Taiwanese or South Korean who comes here and goes to Princeton and Stanford and Yale, they have an option to go back because those countries are thriving. They have an opportunities in those places. So if we are kind of treating these people as if you stay in the United States, we always will look at you with suspicion and will check your ID when you're walking around. Those people will not stay. They will go back. That's the problem I have in my company, keeping those people here.
But we even throw them out.
To be a little more.
Well, somebody throw out.
You know, after we spend all this money educating, and it costs probably $300,000 to educate a science PhD when you add it all up, and then we say you can't stay. I mean, send them back home. That's nuts.
Well, let me follow up on that. I mean, if total legal immigration is a kind of zero-sum game, and the concern here is clearly over making it easier for highly skilled, highly educated people to gain residence and then citizenship, who will be the losers? I mean, should there be a lower priority on reuniting families Should there be lower priorities on other categories of immigrants?
Well, I'd certainly say there should be a priority for the highly skilled workers. I'm not sure who the loser ends up being, but it's certainly just from a different perspective, just a economic competitive perspective, it will hurt the U.S. if we don't allow these highly skilled people to remain in the country. As we were saying, we get a lot of students out of Princeton, local universities that want to stay. We know that they'd be good for the company, but there's a hurdle just from the company perspective to keeping them here. And if we're not able to do that, especially for small companies, we're going to lose out in the competitive landscape to other companies. And in our company and most now, competition is global, so if those people go elsewhere, we're going to lose to other companies that can attract those people, and I think that will be worse overall for everybody. So that seems like a clear way to win by making it easier for those people. I'm not sure who the losers end up being.
Okay. I mean, Governor Romney last week, I think there was a reference to it earlier, said he would staple a green card to every advanced degree received by a foreigner in the U.S. The idea may be derivative of Steve Jobs or others. But would that solve a substantial part of the problem we're talking about today? Mr. West outlined some other reforms. So I guess I would ask you, do you agree with Governor Romney, each of you? And what other single reform do you think would be most important to help to resolve the issues this conference is focused on?
Well, I don't want to get into politics over here, but I wish Mr. Romney, as a national leader, would talk about immigration in a more inclusive form than the way he has been talking, because that's one of the reasons that people get turned off. But fundamentally, you say about what is the losers. We are a global company. We are not huge, but we have 10,000 employees around the world. One of the options that we do have is, well, if it's difficult for people to come here, well, why don't we set up a research center in Germany or in Taiwan, like a lot of other big companies are doing? Well, what happens when you do that? We as a company might survive, but in the long run, what happens is that when we set up a
Are any other panelists responding? I just leapt up with my passionate question for you. Rebecca Esme, I'm a local attorney here in Princeton, primarily business and entrepreneur visas. My question is, I guess perhaps to be addressed to David, economics drives a lot of our concerns about immigration, rightly or wrongly. And we have Trenton right nearby. New Jersey has no regional center. New York has been awesome in getting regional centers. Kudos to you. Are we addressing, and of course you're not from New Jersey, but do you have any explanation for why we have not put a regional center in New Jersey and perhaps Trenton, or any suggestions in luring entrepreneurs and bringing money in to New Jersey?
I mean, when you look at the variation across metropolitan areas in terms of those that are more forward-looking and have made more progress on these issues versus places that have not, it really comes down to local leadership. And obviously, in New York, Mayor Bloomberg has put a high priority on.
I talk embarrassment and embarrassment of riches here in New Jersey, and I didn't dwell on it, but I really meant the embarrassment part. I mean, we have way more immigrant richness in this state than we kind of deserve at the present moment, given what the policy landscape looks like, and that certainly extends to economic development. So there was talk in the Corzine administration towards the end of that, and with work that Nick and others did on that Blue Ribbon panel, of actually kind of bringing state policy into line with the economic needs with respect to immigrants. But that fell apart with the arrival of the Christie administration. I actually sit on that Governor's Council on, what's it even called? New Americans. But it is not a thriving body. And so, this governor is no fool. He knows what side his bread is buttered on, and he meets with Indian and there he makes gestures towards immigrant communities, but it's not happening in a kind of very concerted or organized or with the support of the legislature. There's much more that could.
Being an immigrant and having been in extensive contact with the INS over the years, both personally and in business, I've kind of wondered, is there an overarching objective of U.S. immigration policy, and what is it?
Another issue that we face as a nation, and it's a global crisis, is a demographic one. And throughout the world, there are plummeting birth rates. And even in places like India and Mexico, we used to rely on Mexico as a source of unskilled labor. Well, guess what? That source may dry up in the future. And it used to be that our birth rate, at least in comparison to other Western European countries, was fairly respectable. But we're now moving down to replacement rate in terms of our birth rate. So we may find ourselves in the situation of many European countries where they simply cannot rely on their domestic labor pool and neighborhood labor pool to satisfy their needs. So this whole issue of population and demographics is very, very important.
Or like Japan.
All right. Quick questions, two of you.
I've got two quick ones. Yes. Mine will be short as well. Michael Rodriguez, I teach politics at Richard Stockton College, not too far away from here. My question deals with the shift in the Obama administration from workplace raise to immigration audits, and how much of an obstacle that is for businesses, not knowing whether they'll get hit with an audit. And this happens, and apparently about 25 companies in New Jersey have been audited. It happens very quickly. Oftentimes they summarily dismiss the employees, and it just sort of seems like a quiet way of disrupting what otherwise would be a workforce that took a long time to develop. And what kind of obstacles you folks see that for businesses, especially smaller businesses?
Yeah, I guess a large part about the whole issue is it's just another piece of risk or perceived.
Paul Feldman with the Global Talent Bridge Initiative at World Education Services. I'm very impressed that this discussion has reached beyond simply talking about visas. We work with both international students and with immigrants. And one of the things I wanted to mention and get your thoughts on are the talents of immigrants who are already here. We talk about stapling the green card or bringing in entrepreneurs. 2.7 million immigrants in the United States have bachelor's degrees or higher and are working in either unskilled jobs or unemployed or working in semi-skilled jobs. To what extent can companies like yours not only look to immigration, but to the immigrant population that is here? 90,000 in New Jersey who have bachelor's degrees, who are either unemployed or in unskilled jobs, and roughly a similar number who are in semi-skilled jobs. Are there ways that you can look to reach into what is part of that global talent pool, but that's already living here, people who came through the family unification and other means? Does anybody, you all think about that? And are there methods to reach that population that you found successful?
Yeah, I wouldn't say specifically. I guess philosophically we like to think that the best way is if we had no idea whether anybody was an immigrant or not. It's just an open possible. And once we find them, there are no special hurdles, no matter what your background is, to bring them on. That's obviously not totally the case today. So we don't do anything specific for a particular group, but we certainly encounter more hurdles.
I think with that, thank you to panelists and to the audience.
Presentations and to the task force in the hard work that they did in putting this event together today for us. Speaking for the trustees of Einstein's Alley, we're pleased to have presented this program, and we look forward to presenting future programs. I just want to thank all of you in the room today for joining us. Thank you.